Hey there, welcome back to Move with Joe. Today's big question is whether or not we should be engaging our core while we're walking. Now, to take a step back and get a little context, the human body, or the adult human body, has over 200 bones. We have over 600 muscles, and depending on who you reference, anywhere from 250 to 360 joints. If you think about the complexity of actually walking, and with all those parts, all those bones, all those muscles, and all those joints working together, walking is actually a very complex thing. And so instead of just chit-chatting, I want you to actually experience what it's like to have a little compare and contrast between walking with an engaged core and walking with more freedom through your core. So to begin, let's have you engage those trunk muscles. So you're going to engage your obliques, your rectus abdominis, kind of like you're bracing. Let's say you're bracing if somebody was going to punch you and you wanted to brace. And go ahead and take that for a walk and just see what you experience with this engaged core. Notice the quality of ease in the movement. Notice what is easily accessible to move and what is more limited in your movement as you're walking back and forth. So take a moment to explore that and then shake it out. Let go of those abdominal muscles and go ahead and walk with a relaxed core and notice what has shifted. Now, if you are most people, what you'll notice is that there's a lot more movement available. And there should actually be a lot of movement in our body, in our joints as we're walking. If you have a really condensed, rigid core, it's going to limit how much movement is available in flexion, extension, as well as rotation. And if you look at a person walking on the streets, there's going to be a counter rotation, or there should be a counter rotation. Some people are very rigid and held in their upper bodies. But in a natural gait, as one leg is stepping forward, the opposite arm is coming forward. And so if we have a very rigid core, that's going to cut off that ability for the movement to rotate up and through the spine. It's also going to limit how far you can extend your hip forward and back. If I am really engaged here, pulled in really tight, I'm not going to be able to fully extend my hip. If, however, I have availability to move, then I get more extension, I get more rotation, and the forces, instead of stopping in the back or shearing across the joint, actually can rotate and come up and through the spine. So this is very contrary to what many people think about in terms of, having a tight engaged core. There are certain times where you might want that, but movement in walking is not one of them. Another factor to consider is that just because you can contract a muscle strongly, it doesn't mean that you know how to use it efficiently. So you may be working on L-sits or V-ups or some type of core exercise where you are creating a lot of strong tension to create a particular movement. And that's great. However, that doesn't translate into efficient movement when it comes to walking. So you need to separate these ideas out. Okay? There's times where you build core strength for a particular movement purpose. In my climbing, you certainly need core strength, particularly on overhanging routes where you're having to climb inverted and be able to connect the kinetic chain of movement through the whole body. But on, let's say, a more vertical route, you don't need to have the same type of core strength to do that particular movement. And in fact, if I'm really pulled in on my core, it's going to limit my ability to reach for another hold. So there's times where we need a contracted core, and then particularly with movement, there are a lot of times where we don't want to be contracted and pulled in. We actually want to be able to respond to the environment. And so that's another thing to think about in terms of when we're walking, particularly maybe when we're not in a city environment where we're on a flat surface, but when we're out in nature, if we're very rigid and held here, it's going to limit our availability to respond to changes in the surface. So if I'm on a hiking trail and there's a lot of loose rocks, there's other streams and things that we have to maneuver around, having a availability for the body to respond when you unexpectedly step on a loose rock or you begin to slip, having the ability to respond and adapt to those changes quickly is easier to do than if you're engaged really tightly. So a good example of that is if I'm, let's say, fighting somebody and I'm already contracted like this, it's going to be harder for me to be able to respond and block a punch versus if I am loose and ready to respond to the oncoming opponent. So these same concepts apply when we're walking. If we're really tight, if we're really engaged here, it doesn't allow for movement to happen naturally. So lastly, movement is a complex motor skill that requires a tremendous amount of coordination and timing. Like I said, hundreds of joints, bones, and muscles all coordinating and working together. So the more we are improving our coordination, our timing, our sequence, our initiation, and practicing these skills, the more efficient we'll become in our movement. And that is why I am offering this workshop this weekend on finding your stride. It's to create better movement awareness, starting to learn how to find better support coming from the ground up and through the body, and coordinating all these different parts of ourselves to create more efficient, more effortless, and ultimately more healthy movement through the body. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's short video on walking. I'll provide a link to the Finding Your Stride class that I'm doing this weekend. This will be something that will continue to work on the efficiency, coordination, timing, and giving your system a lot more variability to improve the coordination through your system and to make walking more enjoyable, have less pain, and make it more efficient so that you can go further with your hikes and overall improve the whole system to function better. All right, till next time.